Great, so in the last lesson, we created this kind of banner that will go at the top here. Now, okay, it's not the most interesting banner, but it gets the point across. What we're going to look at today is this kind of pizza card. Now, in the future, there will be plenty of pizzas and we'll be able to add and remove and all of that kind of stuff. But for now, let's just focus on making one individual pizza. And I'll also hear no comments about pineapple on pizza. It's a valid ingredient. Let's go ahead and look at our code here. So this is just our kind of where we left stuff in our last session. Make sure that you're running your app, so with npm start in your terminal, and you've got your React app open in front of you. So the best way to approach this is to probably treat those two separate things, kind of the hero as one component and this kind of pizza index, if you like, a bit like the index in a book. It's probably worth treating those as two separate components, just in case we want to use them in different places in our app. So what we can do is, inside our components folder here, I'm going to make a new file, and we'll call this pizza index.js. Now, again, we're using Pascal case here, so that's an uppercase letter at the front and an uppercase letter to indicate kind of different words instead of using a space or a dash or an underscore, etc. So we've got our pizza index.js here. Well, what we're going to need? We're going to need to make this a function and export it. Let's go ahead and do that, just like we did in the last lesson. So in here, we will say function pizza index. Don't forget this must be Pascal case, must be uppercase P at the beginning. And then we have our function. Do not forget to export it, so export default pizza index, just like that. Just so that you're aware when you're looking kind of around the internet, what you might see, I'm just going to comment this out, what you might see is this. You can put the export default wherever you like. Well, I'll say wherever you like, you can put it in one of these two places, really. You can either say export this function or export default this function, or we can write our function and then say export default that function. It's entirely up to you which way you do it. It's entirely up to you. I personally prefer to do it this way because I think it makes sense. In my head, it says we've made our function and we're doing stuff in our function and then we're exporting it. I don't know, that sort of makes more sense in my head, but either way works absolutely fine. It's entirely up to you. But I just want to show you that so that you aren't surprised when you see something different when you're looking for answers online. So in the future, our kind of pizza data will come from an API endpoint. But just while we're building a single card, what we can do is we can kind of mock up what kind of will come from that API just by saving some data in a variable. And instead of saying, go and get the data from the API, and then I'm going to take the data from that, we're just going to take it from this variable. So in the text accompaniment to this video, I've actually put a JavaScript object with some pizza data for us to kind of put into our pizza card that we're going to be making. So what I'm going to do is inside this function here is I'm just going to make const pizza data equals, and then I'm going to paste in our pizza data here. So what we've got in this pizza data is we've got the name of our pizza, we've got an image, and this is just a URL to an image of a Hawaiian pizza. It's got its size and it's got whether it's vegetarian or not. And of course, this isn't vegetarian because it has ham and stuff on it. So what we can do is we can kind of pretend for now that this that this data has come in from an API, but it's not really, it's just come in from this variable here. So what we actually want to do is we want to return a component that's going to be our pizza. So we shall return, and don't forget to open some parentheses so that we can put a bunch of stuff in here. Now, what we want to do is we want to have a look at Bulma documentation, and what we're actually going to be making is, let's see, is it in elements? No, I think it might be in components. Yeah, we're going to make a card that looks a little bit like this. It's going to be much, much smaller with what we want to do, but it's going to have a card header and an image and even some content below it as well. So it'll look a little bit like one of these, but you know, it's all interchangeable. So of course, go and have a look at the documentation, but I'm just going to kind of use what I've got as a reference here, because the point of Bulma is that it should make things simpler and easier rather than more complicated. And as developers, we do have a habit of sometimes making things a little bit more complicated than they need to be. So let's keep this nice and simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my card a div, and this will have a class name of card. We also want inside there, we want kind of a header. So we'll give this a div with a class name of card dash header. So inside here, then we're also going to have a h4 of with a class name of card dash header dash title. So let's just say here we give it the title of title, and I save this. Now let's go to our React app. You'll see that it's not actually imported here. Well, that's because we've not actually put it into our app. We've created this, we've exported it, but we've not yet imported it into our app.js. So let's make sure that we actually do that. So let's import our pizza index, and I'm just going to hit return here, and that auto completes it nicely. I would say get into the habit of using the autocomplete, but also try not to rely on it too much. And I know that that's kind of a bit of an oxymoron. That's a bit of a fine line between those two. Make sure that if the autocomplete is there, like this, the autocomplete is there, check that it's exactly what you expect. If it is, then use it. Don't just rely on it and think, well, if it's auto-completing something for me, then yes, it must be correct. It can sometimes get things wrong. Or it never gets anything wrong, but it can sometimes think you want something when actually you want something else. So we've imported our pizza index from our pizza index component. And what we're going to do is we're going to put it down here, and we're going to say pizza, and again, autocomplete, and close off that component. Okay, let's save that now. Hey, wonderful. We've got kind of this big long title because we've not told it how big it should be, but that's okay for now. That's all absolutely fine. We can kind of come back to that later. So let's head into our pizza index again, and we've got our title inside our card header. Wonderful. Now let's have a look at the image. Now, according to the Bulma documentation, the way that we do that is we give it a div with a class name of card dash image. And inside here, we have another tag called figure. Again, please feel free to refer back to your HTML tags documentation in kind of module 1, or kind of go on what the documentation is telling you, or what I'm telling you. So this figure now needs a class name of image, And then we can also give it kind of a ratio, what sort of sizing do we want this image to be. So I'm going to say it is dash 2 by 1. And that will just set the ratio of this image for us. So inside our figure here, we then need an image. And inside this image, we need a source. Now what I'm going to do here just for now is I'm going to just paste this inside here just so that we can see how it looks. So if I save that now, hey, fantastic, we get the image of the Hawaiian pizza. Wonderful. And this is a ratio of 2 by 1. So it's kind of for every 1 pixel or every 1 inch or centimeter that it is vertically, it is 2 of that horizontally. Fantastic. Let's actually now go and put just that kind of bottom piece in, and then we'll have a look at sizing this. So outside this card image div here, we'll then have another div, and this has a class name of card-content. And in here, I'm just going to put a P. Actually, we don't even need the P here, I don't think, because it's going to be formatted by kind of that card content. So what I'm going to do is in here, I'm going to say description, because then we can kind of see it working. Now let's go back to our app. And yeah, we can see that we've got this description in the card. Great. Let's now actually look at sizing. Now, the way that we can do this is we can use something in Bulma called columns. Now, I implore you again to go and have a look at the documentation on this. But one of the ways that we can kind of make this, kind of sized appropriately is we can wrap the whole thing in a div. So I'm going to say div here. And you see we get that error because it's saying, hey, you've got 2 components in here rather than 1 parent component. Well, that's no bother. What we can do is we can just highlight everything that we want to put inside that div. Now be very careful where you're starting and ending. Only highlight what you want to move into this new div here. Now there's a couple of ways that we can do this. We could use Command or Control X to cut it, and then Command or Control V to paste it into our new div here. I'm just going to Command Z to undo that. Now I've got this all highlighted here. Now what I can actually do is use Option or Alt and up. And you see what that does is it kind of grabs all of that and moves it up in our document. Have a quick go at using all of these things, and don't forget you can always use Command and Z or Control and Z to undo anything that you get wrong. Great, so we've got a bit of a formatting issue, or a little formatting issue here. So I'm just going to do Option Shift F, sorry, and that will format everything nicely for us. So this div here, this then needs a class name of column. So if I save this now, you'll see, oh, okay, nothing really changed. We've got a little bit of kind of padding or a margin around either side of it here. But then what we can do is we can kind of give it options to say, hey, it should be, this big on desktop, it should be this big on a mobile, it should be this big on a tablet. So what I'm going to say here is I'm going to leave a space and say is -1 -quarter -desktop. And this is Bulma will say, well, I can see that you're on desktop. It's the size of a desktop, so I'm going to make it this big. I'll just leave that up so that you can double check what you've got here. Well, that's all very well and good. Let's say that we're now going to go onto a tablet. Okay, well, it's gone massive again. Well, what we can do is we can say, hey, how about we have them thirds on a tablet? We want 3 across on a tablet. So we'll say here is 1/3 third tablet. And we save that. So is 1/3 tablet. And then let's kind of mock up a tablet size. Ah, brilliant. You see that little jump that we got there? So that's now taking up 1/3 of the screen when it's tablet sized. Now mobile, not so great. So let's go ahead and say is half mobile. Save this. And on a mobile, yeah, we get it half of the screen size on a mobile. Well, brilliant. So I hate doing responsive CSS. I will do it, I can do it, and I can make it work really, really well. However, I hate doing it, which is where things like Bulma and Bootstrap really come into their own, because they do all of that hard kind of thinking for you when it comes to the responsiveness. Fantastic. So we've got that working in terms of responsiveness, and we've got our component rendering to our website. Let's now put some of that data, this kind of dynamic data, into this title and description. And of course, the image will change depending on the pizza that's actually being shown. So the way that we do that is using curly brackets. So inside this title here, I'm going to remove that. And I'm going to just put in some curly brackets. Now, if you've done experimented with kind of PHP, maybe you've done some kind of WordPress development in the past, you'll know that what we can do is we can write HTML and we can kind of say, but start some PHP here, and then we write some of that kind of language, and then we stop the PHP and go back to being HTML again at the end. It's not exactly how it works, but that's kind of the gist of it. Now, what we can do in our JSX here is we can kind of, if we pretend for a moment that this is HTML, and it's not, it's JSX, but if we pretend that this is HTML, we say, hey, carry on making HTML up until this point here, and then we want you to do something with JavaScript inside here. And then when you've done that, I want you to go back to being HTML again. Again, this isn't, don't get too hung up on the terminology that I'm using here, but that's kind of a good way, I think, of thinking about this. It's like, this is just, we're making HTML to go on to the, we're using JSX to put HTML on our website, but then inside these curly brackets, we're saying, hey, do some JavaScript, and then whatever that gives you, make that into HTML and put it on our website. That's kind of the way that I like to think of this, this function here. So what do we actually want in here? Well, what we want is this pizza data, and we want the name. So what we can do is we can say, go ahead into the pizza data object, and then we can use dot notation to say, grab its name. Okay, let's save that. Fantastic, we now get Hawaiian because it's actually pulled that from our pizza data. If we change this now and say Donald Duck and save this, you'll see that we then get Donald Duck in here. So whilst this is a bit of a mocked up version, we've just got all of that data in a variable. Maybe if this information changes because it's from a CMS, a content management system, or it's taken from an API, then this will live update on our website, or it will update when new people get to our website. We don't have to go and completely change the code in order to deal with having new pizzas or renamed pizzas, for example. Okay, so I'm just going to Command Z here to put that back to being Hawaiian. Now, the card image won't physically change, but what we should be doing is taking whatever this image is rather than having it hard-coded here. So what I'm going to do is, inside this source here, is I'm instead going to use curly brackets, and we're going to say pizza data dot, dot image. So if we save that now, again, nothing should change, but that is now taking it from the object rather than our hard-coded image. Now we want to put in a bit of a nice description. So what would be nice here is if we could say something like something inch pizza, so a 10-inch pizza or an 8-inch pizza or something like that. And we'll have the name in there as well, so it becomes a bit more human. So it says kind of an 8-inch Hawaiian pizza. So inside the description, again, this is dynamic data, so we're going to use curly brackets. And we'll say we'll give it a template literal. So we're going to use backticks because we're going to construct this string with some other data. And we'll say a, and then dollar curly brackets, because again, this is a template literal. All we're doing here is writing JavaScript. So a pizza data dot size inch, and then the name pizza data dot name, and then we'll say pizza exclamation mark, and then I'm even going to put a little emoji in there, but it's entirely up to you, of man licking his lips or a little emoticon licking their lips. So now if we save this, brilliant, we get an 8-inch Hawaiian pizza. So let's just go back. So we get a, and then the size, inch, and then the name, pizza. Fantastic. So if we change something like this to 50, that's one heck of a pizza. We then get a 50-inch Hawaiian pizza. This dynamically is kind of updated based on the data that we've got in this variable here. Okay, let's put that back to 8. Now, there is something that I think would be quite nice here, is you see we're getting this warning here, and it's saying image elements must have an alt prop or an alt tag, an alt property in them. Don't worry about props, we're going to be looking at that shortly. So must have an alt prop either with meaningful text or an empty string for decorative images. Well, this is not a decorative image. This is actually an informational kind of image for people. If you're using a screen reader, you'll want to know that we're showing an image of a Hawaiian pizza. So we want to make I think it would be okay to have the alt text be the same as this, because it is a so many inch, whatever, pizza that we're showing in that image. So what we could do here is we could have alt equals, and then we could just go ahead and paste in this here. And that will work, if we kind of hover over our pizza here. Or I just kind of break this so that we can see our alt text. There we go. If I just kind of break that now, you'll see that we actually get that as the alt text. It is a little bit bad practice, though, to have the same thing happen in multiple places. So what I want to do is I want to write a little function that returns this string rather than us just kind of using this string directly. So what we can do is outside of our return function here, here, is we can write a little function. We can say function, and then we'll say pizza description. We're going to need the pizza data inside this function. Now we could go ahead and just directly get it. So, we could say pizza data in here. We could go and get that directly. I think it's going to be better practice to instead pass in our data to this function. And this just means that, let's say that we want to move this pizza description function outside of this component and use it elsewhere in our app. It means that we have to do kind of less work because we're already going to be taking some data into it. Don't worry if that doesn't make too much sense. It'll kind of make a bit more sense as you start using React a bit more, and definitely towards the end of this module. So what we want to do here is we want to return from this, well, we want to return this string. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this template literal here. So we're going to return this template literal, but instead of going and getting the pizza data.size from here, we're going to just take whatever is passed in .size. So we'll say data.size and data.name. Don't worry again if this is a bit like, well, what's the point in that? Kind of just trust me at the moment that this is a better way of doing it. And then as you use React more, you'll kind of get into this habit because it makes things easier for you. So don't worry about it too much just yet. So now what we can go ahead and do is we can replace the strings that we're using here with our pizza description and then hand it our pizza data. And I'm going to do the same thing for our alt text. Just here, we will say pizza description and hand it our pizza data. Great. So that was quite a lot. We'll go over what we've done in a moment. But you'll see that we're back to an 8-inch Hawaiian pizza down here. Well, that's because we've moved out kind of that functionality of creating the description string. We've moved that out into its own function here. We then call upon that function to create kind of, or to give us the alt text and the description of the pizza. And the reason that we've handed in this pizza data here is that it means that later on, say we've got a part of our application that just lists out the descriptions of our pizzas. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but maybe you've got some screens up in your pizzeria that you just need a list of the descriptions for people. Well, what that means is we can then move this function out into a different part of our application and import it here instead, and it will still work in the way that we expect. We're doing really well, but there's just one more thing that I think that we could do, not really from a coding and development point of view, but from just a kind of let's write good English point of view. So you'll see on our app here, we've got a 8-inch Hawaiian pizza. Well, that doesn't make sense. If it was a 7-inch Hawaiian pizza, we should use a, but it should be an 8-inch Hawaiian pizza. Now, the great thing about React, and of course we can do this in vanilla JavaScript as well, just with regular HTML, CSS, and JavaScript apps. But one of the wonderful things about React is it kind of makes it really intuitive for you to kind of manipulate data within this component here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a little function inside this pizza index component that says, well, if it's an 8-inch pizza, or if it's an 11-inch pizza, or an 18-inch pizza, or maybe even an 80-inch pizza, it will say an instead of a. So let's go ahead and write just a nice little simple if-else statement that will return either a or an, depending on the size of our pizza. So let's go ahead and say function, and let's call this a or an. I think that kind of makes sense. What are we going to need in this function? Well, we're going to need to know the size of our pizza. So we'll say size, or maybe even just num would work, because we're just dealing with a number in the scope of this function. And inside here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write an array of all of the numbers that will require an, and then we'll say if that array includes num, then return an, but if it doesn't, then a is fine. Of course, there's probably multiple different ways of doing this, but this is a nice simple way of doing it. So we'll say const, and I'm going to call this an nums, because it's nums that require an, equals, and then this will be an array with the number, well, so a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, so I think an 8, and then a 9, a 10, an 11, so 11, and then a 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, an 18, so that's 18. I think that's probably it. A 19, 20, and then a 30, a 40, a 50, a 60, a 70, an 80. Are we ever going to have an 80-inch pizza? I doubt it. So I'm just going to leave it at that, 8, 11, and 18. So what we can just say here is, if an nums dot includes our num, whatever's passed in, well, we want to return the string an. But if it's any other number, else return a. Because this is always going at the beginning of the sentence, it's going to be an upper case. So now we've got that a or an, and we're going to say if it's 8, 11, or 18, we'll say an. If it's any other number, we'll say a. And we'll just insert this into here. So we'll say $, curly brackets, a or an, and then we need to hand it our data dot size. So if I save that now, what we should end up with is when we go to our website, we've got an 8-inch Hawaiian pizza. Let's go back and just try out. Let's change this to 9 and save that. We get a 9-inch Hawaiian pizza. Okay, so this is actually really powerful, right? We can now go ahead and just write this function that only really applies to this component. That's really, really handy. It means that we can keep everything organized. Instead of having this one big app.js file with all of our functions that deal with everything in our website, we can now just write this function. This only applies to our pizza index, or this card in our pizza index. That's pretty cool, right? So let's just have a little recap on what we've actually done here, because we've done loads. We've created our card using the Bulma class names to make all of that styling. We had to follow some rules here with putting the right divs and the right class names in the right elements. We've then also taken some dynamic data. So rather than having this hard-coded as the pizza name, we've taken this from a variable. That means we can change it later. We did that with our image and our description as well. Then what we've done is we've created a function that will construct that description for us based on the pizza data that we give it. Not only that, but we actually did a bit of kind of non-React based work. We did a bit of just kind of clever JavaScript to say, hey, I want you to change what kind of is rendered to the website based on some data. So we're saying, hey, if the size of our pizza is 8, 11, or 18, we want you to use proper English here instead of an A. But it will use A if it's any other number. So I think we've done pretty well here. We're going to have a look in a little bit about kind of using different class names based on isVeggie as well. But feel free to take a quick break before we go into that in the next session.